Hello everyone, today we will be solving the Biology Paper 1 multiple choice. It is the May-June 2024 paper and we will be solving the first 10 questions. Let's move on to question number 1. The diagram shows some of the structures in a plant cell. Which labeled parts show a sap vacuole, a nucleus, and a chloroplast? So here I am circling the dark circle here in the plant cell, which is known as the nucleus. The nucleus is often positioned at the side of the cell because of the large sap vacuole in the middle. It contains the DNA of a plant cell. So here we have the nucleus, which is Z. So B is and C are the options we have here, and then we have X, which is the sap vacuole. It is often large for a plant cell, and the animal cells have smaller temporary ones. So X is sap vacuole. So we have B as an option, and C are the chloroplasts, which are responsible for the photosynthesis. They are usually green in color because they contain the chlorophyll, and Y is chloroplast. So the correct option is B. Here we go. Let's move on to question number 2, which is a new organism is discovered. It contains DNA in a cellular structure. To which group of organisms could it belong, and to which group it could not belong to? So we have bacteria, fungi, and viruses to consider. I think we'll start with bacteria, so I'm just going to make a bacteria cell. Okay, so let's draw the bacterial cell. We have the capsule, we have the villi, and then let's draw the flagellum and the nucleoid. So A and B are the options we have, and then viruses contain DNA, but not all viruses contain DNA. Most of them contain RNA, so B is the correct option, and fungi do have DNA in them, so option B is correct. So let's move on to the third question. It says, when animal cells and plant cells are placed in distilled water, the animal cells burst, but the plant cells do not. Which statement explains this difference? So bursting of the cell usually depends on the cell wall. Animal cells do not have a cell wall, whereas plant cells do have a cell wall. So we have option D, which says the cell wall of plant cells resists dirt or pressure. So this is the correct answer. So circle that. Let's move on to question number 4. The diagram shows the concentration of magnesium ions in a root hair cell of a healthy plant and in the soil water surrounding the root hair cell. The plant continuously uses up magnesium ions. For the plant to remain healthy, how will the magnesium ions move? So by definition, active transport moves the ions across the membrane from an area of low concentration to a high concentration against the concentration gradient. So we have 5 moles per dm cube inside and 3 moles outside. So the ions are going to move into the cell, and since they're ions, so it's going to be A. Since 3 moles is less than 5 moles, so it's going to go from low to high. Therefore, it's into the cell by active transport. So number 5 is that the key shows shapes representing small food molecules, which diagram represents parts of a glycogen molecule. And large food molecules are made up of smaller food molecules. So glycogen is basically a form of glucose, and here glucose has a triangular shape. If you look at B, it has a chain of triangles, and since glycogen is only glucose and nothing else, so the answer is B. Okay, so now we'll move on to question number 6, which states that the enzymes are biological catalysts. Which type of molecule can be an enzyme? So by definition, they're protein in nature, so the correct option is D. Next is question 7. The graph shows factors affecting the rate of photosynthesis. We have 3 graphs. One is light intensity, the second is carbon dioxide concentration, and third is temperature. This is a little bit of a tricky question, so we'll go through this carefully. At which points on the graph could the rate of photosynthesis be limited by light intensity? So the first table is as light intensity increases, the rate of photosynthesis also increases. So at 1 you can see that the light intensity is limiting, hence the rate of photosynthesis is also limiting. So we have 1 as an option, and then for the next table we have carbon dioxide concentration increases, the rate of photosynthesis increases. Here, as we can see, when the carbon dioxide concentration is at its peak as well, the rate of photosynthesis is not increasing, which means that there is another factor which is affecting it, which could be light. So 0.4, 0.1, and now we'll move on to the third graph. So at 5 the temperature as it's its peak, but then it starts going down, which means that there is another factor which is limiting, which is light intensity. So the correct option was B. Now the diagram shows a section through a leaf. Now this diagram you need to memorize the parts and its functions. So what are the functions of the parts labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4? 1, as you can see, is pointing towards the chlorophyll, which we discussed earlier in question 1, which is responsible for the photosynthesis of a plant cell. So we have option C and D as correct potential answers. Then we have 4, which are basically the air spaces in between the cells, and the air spaces are usually there for the gaseous exchange. So again, 4 is C and D. And now the only thing remaining are 2 and 3. So it's either C or D. So So 2 is pointing towards the xylem cells, which are responsible for transporting water in a plant cell. And 3 is the phloem, which transports sucrose. So the correct option is D. Let's move on to question number 9. Which pathway is taken by water and mineral ions through a plant? A, B, C, D. So the correct path is that the water and mineral ions first go through the root hair cells, which are in contact with the soil. Then it goes towards the cortex cells, then the xylem, and then the mesophyll cells. And you can take help from the diagram above. Let's move on to question number 10, which is the final one, and it involves a bit of calculation. So a student investigated the rate of transpiration in a green plant. The plant was growing in soil in a pot. The student watered the plant and then put a plastic bag around the pot, leaving the leaves of the plant outside the bag. She measured the mass of a plant in a pot and the start, and repeated this every 2 hours for 6 hours. So we have our results in the table, and then it says what is the mean rate of transpiration over the 6-hour period. So let's note down the 6-hour period. So we will note down the time of the day where it started and where it ended. So 1276 and 1252. And then we're going to subtract it to find the difference. So we have the answer as 24 grams. And then it says the mean rate of transpiration over the 6-hour period. So we will divide the answer by 6.